$44 million, stolen from the Transcontinental Railroad. May 5th, 1873, 3 in the afternoon. The Massachusetts congressman who took the blame collapses at his desk in Washington, clutching his chest. His name is Oakes Ames. 10 weeks earlier, Congress censured him by a vote of 182 to 36. The charges: bribery, fraud, stealing the largest sum any government project had ever lost. He dies 3 days later, never knowing that his king of frauds scandal would trigger the worst economic crash in American history. To understand how Ames became America's most hated man, we must go back 8 years to February 1865. President Lincoln had a problem. The Transcontinental Railroad was failing. After 3 years of construction, the Union Pacific had built exactly 12 miles of track. 12 miles toward California. The war was ending. Lincoln needed that railroad finished.
This is the classic American paradox of the 1860s. Lincoln understood that private enterprise could accomplish what government could not. But he also knew that such massive undertakings required incentives that would inevitably create opportunities for corruption. He was essentially asking Ames to walk a tightrope between patriotic duty and profitable business in an era when those boundaries were barely defined.
So he made a personal appeal to the one man who could save it, Oakes Ames, the king of spades from Massachusetts, a shovel manufacturer whose family business had armed every gold rush from California to Colorado.
But here is what nobody talks about when they tell this story. Lincoln was asking Ames to perform an impossible task: building a railroad across empty prairie and desert mountains with 1860s technology. No one knew how much it would actually cost. The government offered loans and land grants, but the risk was entirely private. If the railroad failed, investors lost everything. That uncertainty, that gap between public funding and private risk, created the perfect conditions for what came next.
Ames accepted Lincoln's challenge, but he also inherited a partnership that would destroy him. Thomas Durant and the Credit Mobilier of America. Durant was the Union Pacific's vice president, a railroad executive who reportedly summed up his philosophy in 4 words: grab a wad and get out. He had co-founded Credit Mobilier in 1864 as the Union Pacific's construction company. Same corporate officers, same board of directors, same investors, billing the government on both sides of every contract. It was the perfect money machine, with one fatal flaw: nobody was watching.
This is where the fraud mathematics become breathtaking. Credit Mobilier would bid on Union Pacific construction contracts at whatever price it wanted. There was no competitive bidding. The same executives approved the contracts they had written for themselves. In August 1867, Ames signed the largest contract in American history: 667 miles of track for $47 million. The price per mile ranged from $42,000 to $96,000. Same prairie, same rails, same crews. But somehow the desert miles cost twice as much as the farmland miles.
November 1867. Ames sits in his congressional office with a handwritten ledger and a very specific plan. He had just received the first dividend payments from Credit Mobilier. 60% return in 6 months, then 80%, then 100%. By the end of 1868, 805% total return in a single year. From a construction company, building tracks across empty desert. Ames knew these numbers would attract attention. Congressional attention. So he wrote a note in his ledger. Place this stock where it will do us the most good. 2 senators, 9 representatives, all serving on committees that regulated railroads.
This is systematic corruption disguised as opportunity. Ames understood that traditional bribery creates evidence and guilt, but offering below-market stock prices to the right people, that looks like privilege, not crime. He was essentially selling regulatory capture at a discount, making his targets complicit in their own corruption through financial self-interest.
He offered them credit Mobilier stock at $100 per share, par value. The market price was already double that, and climbing every month. Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts bought $2,000 worth in his wife's name. Congressman James Garfield of Ohio, 10 shares. Future Vice President Schuyler Colfax, 20 shares for $1,200 cash. 160 shares total, distributed like playing cards to men who would vote on railroad legislation.
Notice what Ames was not doing. He was not bribing anyone in the traditional sense. These congressmen were not receiving cash payments for specific votes. They were being offered the chance to invest in what appeared to be the most profitable company in American history. 805% dividends looked suspicious, but not impossible. Railroad construction was expensive. Government contracts were secure. The Transcontinental Railroad would transform the economy. From their perspective, Ames was offering them early access to the deal of the century. The conflict of interest was obvious, but in 1867, it was not illegal.
May 10th, 1869, Promontory Summit, Utah. The Transcontinental Railroad is finally complete, 6 years behind schedule and millions over budget. The Golden Spike Ceremony makes front-page news across America. Ames and Durant pose for photographs as conquering heroes. The impossible has been accomplished. America is connected from sea to sea, but behind the celebration, the bills are coming due. The Union Pacific owes the government nearly $30 million in construction loans. Credit Mobilier has billed $94 million for work that actually cost $50 million to complete. $44 million in excess profits, sitting in private bank accounts while the railroad company slides toward bankruptcy.
By 1871, smart money was getting nervous. Those 800% dividends had attracted exactly the kind of attention Ames feared. Financial journalists were asking questions. How does a construction company pay such returns? Where was all this profit actually coming from? The Union Pacific's books told a troubling story. The railroad was broke, but its construction subsidiary was swimming in cash. The same cash that had come from government loans and land grants intended for railroad construction. It was a shell game. And the shells were starting to crack.
Fall 1872. Henry Simpson Macomb has a problem with Oaks Ames. Macomb was an early credit Mobilier investor who felt cheated out of his fair share of profits. After months of bitter correspondence with Ames, he makes a fateful decision. He takes Ames' private letters, the ones discussing stock distribution to congressmen, and delivers them to Charles Dana of the New York Sun. Dana was a former Civil War fraud investigator turned newspaper editor. He had been waiting for exactly this kind of story. 2 months before the presidential election, September 4th, 1872. The New York Sun publishes 4 pages of devastating exposé, The King of Frauds. The headline covers 62% of the entire newspaper. Below it, the complete text of Ames's private letters, names, dollar amounts, stock distributions, everything. The story destroys Vice President Schuyler Colfax within hours. The man known as the Christian statesman, caught taking $1,200 in railroad bribes. Senator Henry Wilson admits his involvement immediately. Congressman James Garfield claims he never received the stock and somehow escapes investigation entirely. But the real target is President Grant himself. Dana timed this exposé precisely 8 weeks before the election. Maximum political damage.
The timing reveals Dana's true strategy. This was not about justice or government oversight. Dana was a Democrat trying to destroy the Republican ticket. Grant and Colfax were running for re-election in November. The scandal would either force Colfax off the ticket or drag Grant down with him. It worked perfectly. Within days, Republican leaders quietly replaced Colfax with Henry Wilson, the same Henry Wilson who had also taken Credit Mobilier stock. The irony was lost on no one. But Dana's plan backfired in one crucial way. Grant won re-election by an even larger margin than 1868. Voters blamed the corruption on Congress, not the president.
December 1872. Speaker James Blaine appoints the Poland Committee to investigate the allegations. Representative Luke Poland of Vermont chairs the House investigation. His mission: determine which congressmen took bribes and whether they should be expelled from Congress. The hearings reveal the scope of Ames' operation. 160 shares distributed to 11 congressmen. $9 million worth of discounted stock offered to the exact legislators who regulated railroad policy. But the committee faces a fundamental problem. Most of the transactions occurred in 1867 and 68. The evidence is 5 years old. Key witnesses have died or disappeared. And the most damaging witness of all, Ames himself, refuses to cooperate. While the House investigates its own members, the Senate faces its own crisis. Senator James Patterson of New Hampshire purchased 30 shares of Credit Mobilier at below-market prices. The Senate Morrill Committee recommends his expulsion, the ultimate punishment for a sitting senator. But Patterson has one advantage his House colleagues lack: timing. His Senate term expires March 3, 1873. The expulsion vote is scheduled for March 4th, one day too late. Patterson escapes removal not through innocence, but through the calendar. 7 days between disgrace and salvation.
Patterson's escape reveals the fundamental weakness in congressional accountability. The Constitution gives Congress the power to expel its own members, but only while they are actually serving. Once a term expires, the punishment becomes meaningless. Patterson could return to New Hampshire as a private citizen, beyond the reach of congressional censure. This created a perverse incentive. The most corrupt legislators, if they timed their scandals correctly, could simply wait out their terms and escape consequence entirely. It was a loophole that would be exploited again and again throughout the Gilded Age. Corruption with an expiration date.
February 27, 1873, the House votes on the Poland Committee recommendations. Ames, censured by a vote of 182 to 36. The chamber erupts in applause. The King of Spades has become the King of Frauds. Officially, James Brooks, the New York representative who bought stock in his son's name, censured by an even wider margin, 206 to 42. But censure is not expulsion. Both men keep their seats. The punishment is symbolic: public humiliation without loss of office or pension. Ames stands on the House floor and delivers his final speech. "I have been made the scapegoat," he declares, "for the greed of others who were glad to share the profits." He was not entirely wrong. The scandal exacts its toll in ways nobody anticipated. Ames returns to Massachusetts expecting disgrace. Instead, he receives a hero's welcome, brass band and all. His hometown sees him as a martyr to partisan politics, but the stress of the investigation has ravaged his health. James Brooks dies of stomach cancer while writing bitter letters to the press, maintaining his innocence to the end. Schuyler Colfax, the former vice president, becomes a business executive and traveling lecturer. His political career destroyed at age 50. And Ames himself. The stress triggers severe stomach problems, sleepless nights, constant pain. On May 5, 1873, he suffers a massive stroke at his congressional desk. 3 days later, he is dead. The king of frauds, killed by his own scandal.
Ames's death completed a pattern that would repeat throughout American financial history. The individual scapegoats face personal destruction, while the system that created them remains untouched. Ames distributed the stock, but he did not create the regulatory vacuum that made it possible. Durant, who originated the entire scheme, faced no consequences at all. The Union Pacific executives who approved the fraudulent contracts kept their positions and their profits. The real lesson was not about individual corruption, but about structural failure. When private companies control public infrastructure and the same people sit on both sides of every contract, fraud becomes inevitable.
But the Credit Mobilier scandal was just beginning its real damage. The Union Pacific emerged from the investigation technically bankrupt. $44 million in excess payments had stripped the railroad of working capital. Track maintenance suffered. Service declined. Meanwhile, Congress passed the Salary Grab Act immediately after the censure vote, a 50% pay raise for all congressmen. Voters interpreted this as Congress rewarding itself after a corruption scandal. The backlash was swift and merciless. The 1873 state elections became a Republican massacre. Voter turnout surged as citizens punished the entire political establishment. And in September 1873, just months after Ames's death, J. Cook and Company collapsed. The investment bank that had financed the Civil War, brought down by railroad speculation. The Panic of 1873 had begun.
The connection between Credit Mobilier and the panic was not direct, but it was real. The scandal had revealed that America's railroad network, the backbone of the entire economy, was built on fraudulent finances. If the Transcontinental Railroad could steal $44 million without detection, how many other railroads were insolvent? Investor confidence collapsed. Railroad bonds became unsellable. Construction projects shut down nationwide. The very industry that was supposed to drive American prosperity became the source of economic catastrophe. It was the first great lesson of modern capitalism. Corruption does not just steal money. It destroys the trust that makes markets possible.
In 1895, 22 years after Ames's death, the Supreme Court finally ruled on the Credit Mobilier contracts. The justices declared the agreements void, obtained through fraud and corruption. The government could sue to recover the stolen $44 million, with interest. But there was one problem. Most of the principals were dead. Durant had died in 1885, Ames in 1873. The Union Pacific itself had been reorganized multiple times. The money was gone. The thieves were in their graves. Justice had arrived, 2 decades too late, and in 1883, 10 years after Ames's disgrace, the Massachusetts legislature officially exonerated him. They declared his actions not deserving of censure, though by then few people remembered why they had ever cared. Today, the Transcontinental Railroad still carries freight across America, built on tracks laid with stolen money by a company that paid 800% dividends while billing the government twice what construction actually cost. The Credit Mobilier scandal established the template for every American corruption crisis that followed. Private companies extracting public wealth through regulatory capture and political bribery. But perhaps its deepest legacy was simpler. It proved that in America, individual scapegoats die, while systemic corruption endures. Oaks Ames lies in a Massachusetts cemetery, his gravestone reading, "A patriot who gave his life for his country." The railroad he built still connects the continent. And somewhere in the desert of Utah, you can still see the unnecessary 9-mile detour that Durant added outside Omaha, purely for extra profit. Even the landscape bears the scars of their greed.
If the Credit Mobilier story drew you in, we have dozens more like it. Every Friday, Paper Empires examines history's biggest financial disasters, the patterns of corruption that keep repeating themselves across decades. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.